Hello, everybody. We are back, and we are ready for another round of Truth or Skepticism. Dylan, you and I have been battling it out the last couple of weeks, and I'm working out. I've been working out. I'm ready.
Yeah, well, I think it sounds like today will be no different. Although I suspect that while you wore the hair shirt last week publicly for your advocacy of the end of the world via chipping, I will have some opinions today that I suspect will provoke some animosity amongst the people, but I'm prepared for it.
Good. I mean, my chipping, I answered another email this morning about the chipping discussion. I mean, it was obviously fully in support of my position, but, the amount
you found the one person.
There's more than one.
Not that I want to go down this rabbit hole again, although I think this will be a recurring discussion. The issue with you chipping people is you love to talk about the benefits, but you offer no mitigation to the liabilities. You use a distract and redirect technique for your argument as opposed to addressing the primary issue. But again,
that is what good debaters do.
Yes, it is. And you are a British parliamentarian by pedigree, or at least a parliamentarian assistant.
A story I will tell you someday, but I was trained by one of the great labor backbenchers, Leo Absey, on parliamentary debate. I just watched him day after day, and the guy was like the smoothest litigator / backbencher, screamer, whatever you want to say. And
I think they would call him a rhetorician.
Rhetorician, I like that. Rhetorician.
But I'm aware, because you've referenced this many times in various contexts, of the substantial influence that parliamentary experience had on your in the formation of young Tom.
Yeah, I didn't realize what it actually did for me, but now I'm starting to put it all together. So what do we got today? We have Truth or Skepticism.
Listen.
Let's do it.
Okay, so what is the greatest problem that plagues society today?
Well, I mean, I don't even know where to start. There's a lot of problems that plague society, but
right.
I will cut to the chase and talk about,
I'll tell you.
Okay.
The greatest problem that plagues society today is that human beings organize their goals, their time, their structure, their behavior around what they believe will be the accumulation of some external material object, benefit, sort of material expression of success. And upon accumulating that material expression of success, whether it's an absolute amount of money, or whether it's a car or a house or a wedding, a husband or a wife, whatever it is, only to find that once they acquire that expression of success, that they are no more satisfied than they were in the aspiration for it. This is so widespread that it has been studied, analyzed, and proven out under the premise that's called the hedonic treadmill, which is derived from the Greek word hedonism, but it speaks to not just sort of the superficial interpretation of the word hedonism, which goes to, sort of some self-indulgence or excessive behavior, but rather through the more fundamental Greek definition of the word, which is a belief that some external success, some external accumulation, some external event, some future occurrence, when I have this money, when I have this job, when I live in this apartment, when I have this house, when I sell my company, when I buy this company, whatever it is, that then I will have emotional satisfaction and peace and purpose in my life. And then people repeatedly do this. And in fact, they become slaves to it, and they forfeit their personal wellness. They forfeit their artistic expression. They forfeit their interaction with other people, their ability to teach young people. They forfeit their personal relationships, all in search of these items that basically become markers along the hedonic treadmill. There is no greater marker on the hedonic treadmill than the accumulation of more and more and more money. And so I believe it's essential for the future of humanity that we relieve people of the prison of the illusion of the hedonic treadmill by subscribing to a newly emergent political philosophy, of which I am now a subscriber, that is called limitarianism. Not libertarianism.
Good, thank God, because I can't handle libertarians. That's one thing I can't handle.
That's not a rational actor. I'm a rational actor,
okay.
And I'm advocating a rational solution called limitarianism.
Okay.
And limitarianism is a solution to the incredible personal misery and dismay that is a plague upon our society as a result of people's imprisonment upon the hedonic treadmill. Limitarianism speaks as such. There is a minimum amount of money that is necessary for a human being to have satisfaction. That has been proven time and time and time again. There is for sure a financial floor below which personal health, happiness, and satisfaction collapses. However, that floor is shockingly low, not nearly as high as you might imagine. And that is scientifically indisputable. Similarly, there is an upper limit as to the amount of money that is necessary for any human being to have. Think of it like scoring 100 on a test. Like you can't get a 200, you can't get a 300. Like if you get the test perfectly, you get an A+, you get a 100. Good job, Tom. Here's your 100. And if you get below 65, that's an F, right? So let's just, to use my academic metaphors, I think it'll be useful. Let's consider that failing grade, that 65, is the financial floor for human happiness. And that perfect score is the upper limit of limitarianism. And the beautiful thing about limitarianism is it relieves the human beings that reside upon this lovely planet of ours from the burden of being imprisoned for decades, seeking more and more and more and more and more, and rather frees them upon accumulating more than enough resources to live a very healthy life for those and those around them for the rest of their lives, while giving them the freedom of getting the satisfaction of scoring that 100, good job, and allowing them then to explore an artistic expression, a sporting expression, a teaching expression, an adventure on a mountain, maybe a boat to sail upon the sea. Who am I to say what one might do with their time were they to be freed from the burden and imprisonment of the hedonic treadmill?
That is so eloquently.
No, I'm not done. I'm not done. And this is a 45-minute podcast, so you'll have plenty of time to respond. I'm getting there. The primary indictment of my limitarian thesis, as always, will be, oh my goodness me, if we cap the total amount of income any one individual can accrue at $50 million, $25 million, whatever the number is. Tons of money, though. I'm not here to give you a problem. If we limit that number, then, oh my goodness me, there'll be no innovation. We would never have Henry Ford. We would never have a cure for cancer, which, by the way, we still don't have. We would never have spaceships. We would never have the Facebook. Okay. If that's the case, to preempt your primary indictment of my limitarian hypothesis, then do tell in your rebuttal when you speak to the merits of innovation. Why is it that the first man in space came from a communist country where there was no economic benefit? Why is it, I guarantee you, if I went to the NBA and I said to every NBA player, I'm only going to pay you $1 million a year, and if you don't like it, you can quit. But if you think it's fun playing professional basketball, I'll pay you $1 million a year. I believe if I went to you, the king trader himself, and I said, Tom, I'm capping you out. I'm giving you $1 million a year. If you don't want to continue working with all the young people and teaching all the people and evangelizing your thesis, you can go open a vegetable garden. I believe that all of the people worth listening to, all of the players worth watching, all of the leaders like yourself worth listening to, Mark Cuban, I don't care who your hero may be, that those people would just as readily continue with their actions and their engagement with their enterprises and their profession at a limited number as much as they would for some extreme number. And by giving people the psychological relief of the abstract concept that if I just have another million, another 10 million, another 100 million, another billion, that then I'll be happy, that then I'll be important, that then I will matter, only to get to these various thresholds and find they've forfeited countless years of their lives, relationships, and other possibilities, only to acquire a brass ring that is made of nothing more than old coal from a now shut down coal mine in Kazakhstan. So I have now established my premise. You have 30 minutes to rebut. Hopefully I'll get a chance to rebut your rebuttal. But limitarianism is, and this is not a, and notice I would just ask you one last thing. Notice my posture in presenting the hypothesis, which is not political. It's not moral. It's not about income inequality. It's not about what's right or what's just or who's important or who's good. I don't care. I'm saying this is a gift to humanity to relieve them from the illusion of participation in a hedonic treadmill that only steals their soul and the years of their lives, which could be otherwise used by both paying attention to other people and other meaningful parts of themselves, while continuing to be equally prosperous and enjoy the pleasures of teaching and trading and basketballing and cooking and whatevering. And in the process, relieve so much suffering from people that aspire to these excessive outcomes, including those who achieve them, because so many of those who achieve them are not satisfied. And I will go one last thing. I will leave this as my final comment. Of all of the wealthy individuals that I know in my life and in my own experience, having accumulated wealth and lost it multiple times, my personal happiness has never been a function of the amount of money that I've accrued at any given moment, but more a function of my personal health and relationships and sense of purpose and satisfaction. And it's not to say that rich people are not happy, but the rich people that I know that are happy are not happy because they have money. They're happy because their life has purpose and connection. And so many people forfeit purpose and connection in pursuit of money, only to find that the money does not replace the value of purpose and connection. And limitarianism relieves everyone of this horrendous prison known as the hedonic treadmill. I'm done.
You're done? Are you sure you're done?
I'm complete.
I'm not, as I was trying to think of like where to start with this, I think I have to start with, if bullshit were dollars, you just made a beautiful, that was worth a lot of money. That was special. First of all, and I have to be fair, I'd never heard of the term before, limitarianism.
I'm a limitarianist.
Yes, you are. And I had never heard of the term. When I first heard the discussion topic, I thought it was about libertarians, and I was like, oh my God, I got so much to say about libertarians. And then it's limitarianism, and I'm like, what the hell is that? I had to look it up. First of all, it is not even possible that any word, I'm going to go back to right down to the basics. It is not possible that any word that starts with limit is okay with me. Like, I don't have the capacity. I don't have the ability to understand a word or a lifestyle or a way of building our society with a word that starts with limit. To me, I've always argued that nobody wants to be nobody ever grows up and wants to be passive about anything. That's why I hate passive investing. Nobody ever wants to grow up with the first word of the way that they're going to live their life to be limit something. And so I think that the fundamental problem with this whole discussion is why, in the world that we live in today, why would anybody choose a way of life where we're limited? And then to go back to your argument, like you really leaned heavily on the argument of the most you can score on a test was 100, or like the smartest you can be is to get a perfect score. But that's actually not the way IQ tests work. And if you were to test somebody for their IQ, it would be, just imagine you're a super genius and they say, you know what? Yep, you scored 100 on the IQ test. So now you are the same as every other super genius. Like, you're not any smarter than the next person. Imagine if it was like we all had capped wealth. So it'd be like, you know what? You're just one of 100 million people instead of one of 1,000 people. To me, the conceptually, the whole thing is so ridiculous. Like if I'm one of the smartest people in the world, I want to know what my IQ is. Not because I'm going to go out and brag, hey, I'm one of the smartest people in the world, but I don't want to be capped at 100. I want to tell you I'm 160 if need be. I want to know where I stand. I don't want my wealth. If you want to redistribute in some way wealth, I've argued this forever. Fix a broken tax code. Okay? Fix the tax code. That's all you have to do. The idea of limiting wealth so that I can watch flowers grow if I don't want to, so I can walk or take a boat.
No, you could continue to work. So might I comment?
No, I'm not done yet. No, you can't comment yet. I sat here and at first I was just getting mad, but then I figured, okay, it makes no sense to just get mad about this because I think he's just kind of pulling my chain. Like, this is such, of all the arguments, like, you actually argued against being chipped last week, but you would vote to have limits on, I think the argument that you made, you basically brought up a point that was going to be the basis of my argument, but you cannot eliminate incentives when creating or innovating. I mean, you need to be rewarded. Just telling you at some point, well, thank you, and society appreciates what you've done is not good enough. At certain point, it's not good enough. Okay, it's just the impact that this would have on global innovation, on creativity, on the economy itself. You're basically taking out, an entire upper tier of people that create a significant portion of all the innovation that happens in the world, and you're essentially shutting it down. You're putting a cap on almost every aspect of our global economy and everything else. And your argument that, hey, you know what, basketball players would play for, if you put a cap on the whole thing. No, they wouldn't. I mean, yeah, try to find some $1 million a year job somewhere else. That is a challenge, but they're not going to put it there. There'll be some marketplace somewhere. You can't control every single marketplace that way. So, and unless you could, somebody's going to break that chain. It's not enforceable. Like, that's not scalable. It's too limiting. So what's going to happen is there's going to be this massive brain drain or talent drain to somewhere else. It's not, it can't be enforced. So essentially what you're saying is, let's just destroy our own economy, destroy our own innovation, and let somebody else have have that, because what you're suggesting could never be done. Like, it's so ridiculous. We're going to go a little bit beyond ridiculous in this one. So because of that, essentially what you're advocating for is a destruction of your own market structure, a destruction of your own capital markets. It's going to destroy the economy almost overnight. Massive brain drain, everybody leaves, all your innovators leave. Everything happens, it's gone almost overnight. All the money flows out. There's nothing there. There's no reason for anybody to ever make an investment. There's nothing there.
Let me know when I'm permitted to respond.
Yeah, you can respond.
So I'd like to respond, if I might, with a few questions. Does Tasty Trade have any limits on the amount of leverage that a given customer can use?
Does Tasty Trade have? Yeah, we're regulated. Yes.
Yeah, but you have some limits there.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And do you believe there should be a limit on the amount of taxes you should be charged? Or should the government be allowed to assign unlimited taxation?
Well, as somebody, I mean, we can vote the government out. I mean, it's a democracy.
But do you believe in limits on taxation?
Well, I mean,
do you believe in limits on leverage in the marketplace? Do you believe in speed limits?
Sure.
So your initial point, which was you don't believe in limits as a moral position, is already selectively you don't believe in limits when first of all, so that whole entire.
So I'm sorry, speed limits is different. You can't just.
You said no. You said I, as a man. You said this. You were speaking about the essence of the essential Tom, and you were saying I, as a man, don't believe in limits, and I found that
there are a few very minor exceptions. Speed limits being one of them. That's it.
I won't burden you with further discussion. I think that one is the jury will. I'll leave that one with the jury. So first of all, so let's address that. Second thing, and the most important thing, which is your suggestion of the total annihilation of the existing market structure and collapse of all that is good and true in the economy as a result of capping the upside. And I'm suggesting, like, so let's say the cap was $100 million.
Okay.
And even if it was, let's say it's 100, like, again, I'm not suggesting, that's why it's a philosophy. It's a point of debate. I'm not saying.
Sure, of course.
$10. Like, you were assuming that my limit was, you were really assigning an aggressive income limit in your interpretation of my commentary, which has not been explored. But I guess my point would be that I believe there is some limit that allows for abundant resources and reward for investors, but at the same time frees our society and people in general from the obsession with always having more. That it establishes the same way the taxes at 39% in the highest income bracket or 37% or whatever it is. Well, we consider that to be enough, right? No more. That's enough. There's a limit on federal taxes.
Is it an obsession? Why is it an obsession?
What?
Why is it an obsession to want more? Isn't that what capitalism is?
I would say it's a psychological defect of our culture that has cultivated an obsession with more.
Isn't that the reason that we are what we are today? Isn't that the reason that we
I would say yes, but in the negative sense. Yes, in the negative sense.
So you would prefer what? Like, where? Give me an example.
I would prefer that when it comes to material resource accumulation, that there is a expectation of what would be considered enough. Because in the absence of enough, taxes are high enough. The speed limit is low enough. Leverage is high enough. maximum income levels are high enough.
Is there a
And when you don't
place?
establish these enough, then you basically engender. Now if it's not 55, it's 65. It's not 75, it's 85.
Sure.
This is the speed limit. Now the speed limit's 100. Now it's 200. Now it's 300. All of a sudden, I've got these never-ending, catastrophic, fatal car accidents because the limit is too high. It has exceeded a safe parameter for human life. And I would say that that when you can limit via the limitarian hypothesis.
Is there a place in the world where this exists today?
No, there's not. This is a new thinking from a new generation.
Right. Oh, so you're building it from scratch in your own plan.
No one is. Where? How many people are chipped up right now? Is there a lot of chipping going on?
There's some.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And if you would like to indict my premise on novelty, I will accept it, but I will dismiss it because everything new is by definition new. So I can't defend that.
All right.
But you haven't addressed the core of my argument, which is the prison of the hedonic treadmill.
I don't, that's not how I think about, that's not how I think about the world. That it's, I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. Yeah. Like you're sitting there saying that there's something, that's a horrible character trait, or that's a horrible thing for society. The pressure of society puts on us to want more. And I think that's what actually is the foundation of who we are. I mean, if you have a problem with the wealth that's been created, then address the wealth.
I do not. I have no address. I have no issues with.
No, but I'm saying I have a problem with with generational wealth, and I have a problem with, and I have a problem with tax brackets and things like that. But I don't have a problem with making it.
So, what is your problem with generational wealth and tax brackets?
Well, I think that when you acquire a certain number of things, you can pay more of a fair share. I think there's nothing wrong with that. And I also think that, if you are going to try to hold on to generational wealth from one generation to the next, I think there can be, that can be shared too with the state. So we end up in a situation where, if you're trying to find ways to create revenue to make it better for everybody else and to redistribute that wealth, well, then do it the fairest way. Do it, at somebody's passing, and then do it through. But
you're saying that, so you would say that for the highest income earners, we'll just start with the maximum, super high, not just higher,
just a higher tax rate, a fair tax rate.
You would bet that there should be a higher limit on taxes.
Of course, and there should be less loopholes, and that way, we will have more revenue. But the idea of ever capping anything
isn't a higher tax, if the tax above $100 million was 70, 80, 90%, which it has been in this country in the past, isn't that basically the same thing?
Not really.
And doesn't that have the same effect of disincentivizing innovation that the limitarian hypothesis would have if there's an extremely high tax on income above
Not really.
some number?
Not really, because there's different ways. If you know you're capped, if you know you have a limit and you're capped, your approach is very different than if you know that you can potentially generate revenue or wealth or whatever it is, and then you can use that to reinvest it in different places for different things. There's all these other things you can do, as opposed to telling you, hey, you're
suggesting that allowing the wealth accumulation, but incentivizing the wealth to be invested rather than used for consumption using the tax code.
Well, that accomplishes what you're trying to do.
I don't disagree with that, but I would argue that that's just a more sophisticated implementation of the libertarian hypothesis, where
Not at all. Not at all. I don't agree, because as long as you're taking risk, I don't agree. And the whole idea of the libertarian hypothesis is, it just, like, I don't know where that comes from. It comes out of nowhere. It's out of left field. It has no basis. It's just like
it comes from we have limits on everything else.
No.
There's a limit on how many brownies you can take from the buffet. There's a limit on how fast you can go. There's so many limits you can't even see straight. And once we get the sauce,
that's your second best limit at how many brownies you can take from the buffet.
I was a little bit at a loss. I will agree that.
Okay. All you've got so far is this speed limit. And
no, I have the limit on taxes and the limit on leverage in investing. Okay, both of which are highly persuasive anecdotes. But I would also assert that there's nothing that allows more libertarianism than your chip. The mechanism to enforce the libertarian hypothesis is the Sosnoffian dog chip.
No, the dog chip is different. The dog chip is to keep me alive so that I can keep producing.
I know, but I can use the dog chip to limit anything I want. I can prevent you from leaving your own home.
No, you can't. That's not what that chip does.
Who decides what that chip does?
So who decides what the limit is?
This is the issue.
No,
who decides what the tax code is? Who decides what
the tax code's fair.
Who decides what the leverage in the stock market is?
So the tax code makes sense because that you vote to decide. You vote on who gets to decide that.
That's assuming that voting is relevant to policy, which has been proven.
You can't argue against that. I mean, that's what you vote for.
And argue against voting insofar as voting has proven zero correlation to policy outcomes as a result of gerrymandering in the two-party system.
All right. I'm not going to argue that. That's ridiculous.
That's why 8 in 10 Americans don't even want anything to do with this presidential election. Come on. You think Americans are like, oh, I need to vote. I mean, the only reason you're voting is to try to prevent the person you hate the most from taking over. No one is voting for anything other than some perceived sense of self-protection from some other person that they think is worse than the other person.
That's our fault. That's our fault. Our society's fault. That's us. That's on us.
I disagree. I think we've been taken the gerrymandering and the two-party political system have leveraged their position to imprison us no different than the government in Russia or Saudi Arabia.
You're out of your mind. That's ridiculous. That is absolutely ridiculous.
So my intent with the libertarian discussion is really to suggest that a human being, for consumption purposes, really only needs so much money. And again, who decides? Great question. How much? Great question. The most important point that you've made, which I actually completely agree with, even though it does diminish the credibility of my rather extraordinary assertion of support for libertarianism, is that I would much prefer to see a situation where highly productive, creative, and enterprising individuals are incentivized to invest more in research, development, jobs, create new things, than to pull the money out of the system in some manner that is sort of akin to either political influence or absurdist style consumption. And so I would suggest to the libertarians that they would be better served to drive to a tax code restructuring that highly incentivizes investment and research over distributions and consumption.
Of course. And why don't we start off in your libertarianism, like, whole speech? Why don't we start off on limiting, like, food intake? like start there instead of money. You know, like we can get America healthy before we can figure out how to redistribute wealth.
Again, it's not the American people's fault. The money in politics revised the entire spectrum of food categorization in the late 1970s by influencing the Food and Drug Administration to empower and unleash an unrequited flow of refined sugar that's embedded in the entire ecosystem of the American food manufacturing, distribution, and process, which has as a result toxified the American population, causing a parabolic increase in diabetes and other obesity-related ailments, which are of no fault of the American people, but rather they have been poisoned by their own Food and Drug Administration, which is running cover for the sugar industry, which has been poisoning us for decades.
So then try your limit.
You can't. There's
libertarian theory on that first.
Your unlimited money is allowing total control of the FDA by the sugar lobby. And as such, there's nothing that can be done other than for me to pay my taxes to deal with the excessive level of diabetes and obesity-related ailments, which come out of my tax money, not to mention the unlimited money in the healthcare system that gives me the highest cost healthcare on earth with
Do you know you can use that? Do you know you can use that argument for any single thing that's wrong with society? That exact same argument. You can use that. You can use that argument for anything. All I want to say is that I'm going to go back to my original, because I'm going to keep this really simple. Anything that has the word limit in it is not viable. There's a couple outlier cases.
I would like to request. Please tell Scott Sheridan.
Yes.
I would like to request unlimited leverage on my trading account.
We would give it to you if we could. But we would give it to you if we could, but we can't. So that's not, it's we would give it to you in a heartbeat.
I would like an unlimited speed limit.
We would give it to you if we could, but we cannot do that either. See, these are things we don't have any issue with.
You believe in unlimited leverage. You believe in no speed limit.
I would be.
Sorry?
I actually prefer a speed limit because it normalizes everything, and I prefer limited leverage because it normalizes everything. But those are not the problems we have in America today.
But it does contradict your assertion.
It doesn't contradict my assertion because
an anti-limitarian.
No, because the whole idea of limitarianism that you brought up today, that you started off the conversation with, was all about wealth inequality, and you were trying to flatten out what?
All right.
It was all about wealth inequality, and you were trying to flatten out that curve, and that was the whole argument, and that is a absolutely ridiculous argument. It has no legs to stand on.
And yet, your counter argument is a tax structure that does the exact same thing.
It doesn't really. What it does, what a revised tax structure does, is normalize things, but leave incentives in place. You always have to have incentives. You always have to have carrots out there.
I conceded. But again, I'm a compromising limitarian, and I conceded to the refinement that you offered as being an enhancement of the limitarian hypothesis. But it's still limitarian. It's still a limit. It's a limit on what you can do with your accrued wealth. It's an incentive to use your accrued wealth for research and job creation and investment, as opposed to. That by its very.
Listen, I'm all for addressing the issue of wealth inequality. I'm all for addressing it, but I'm not for limiting what one person, what one person can earn or create if they deserve it, if they work for it, if they deserve it. I have no limitations on that, but they have to share in the wealth. That's all. That's fair.
With a limit.
There's no limit.
Yeah, there is a limit. There's a tax limit.
That's just a percentage. That's a share number. That's all that is. You're not limiting them.
Okay, but the percentage by definition is a limit.
No, that's just wordsmithing. But we have reached our time, and the boys are in.
There's a limit. Is there a limit? Is there a limit on our time?
There is a limit on our time because the boys are up next, and they're in the waiting room waiting for us to be done. It's a different kind of limit. I'm going to send you a book on limits. It's going to help you.
Okay. Okay, I'll study it, and I'll see you next week.
All right. He's Dylan Radigan. I'm Tom Sosnoff. This is Truth or Skepticism, talking about limits today. All right, Dylan, thanks so much.